we're going to meet two incredible women who shared human and political events which historically binds them together. Even though they were on opposing sides of the Civil War, their dedication to their causes, their love for their husbands, their social positions placed each of them in a position of public criticism. Both of these women suffered personal tragedies during the war. Both of these women became public storm centers. Both of these very interesting women faced death or the fear of death on a daily basis. Mary Todd Lincoln and Marina Davis never met. The war led the Davises out of Washington, D.C. before the Lincoln family had arrived. However, if the war between the states had not taken place, we can really assume that these two women would have met several times during the Lincoln administration. Our question today is, would they have been friends? In this fictitious meeting during the spring of 1868, we examine that question. Ladies and gentlemen, allow us to listen very closely now to Mary Lincoln and Marina Davis, Donna Bowen, Greta Ratliff, First Ladies, Blue and Gray.
Mrs. Davis, I understand that you wish to speak to me, although I cannot imagine why. Why, in my time of grief and mourning, you have requested my company. I see even fewer. Most days, I am too miserable to pass through such an ordeal.
Mrs. Lincoln, thank you so much for accepting my invitation. Though the war has been over for years now, there is still much work to be done for those of us who are trying to rebuild the Union. And I hope that the two of us, who were leaders during the war, can now join together to lead afterwards, but for a better purpose, unity. Now, certainly, we're never going to forget all that we've been through in the past years, but I wonder, if the war had never happened, could you and I have become friends?
Friends? I cannot imagine how you and I could have ever become friends.
When your husband was elected to the presidency, my husband was a prominent member of the Senate, and I was a noted Washington postist. Surely our lives would have been intertwined.
Well, intertwined, yes, but hardly developed into a friendship. It is our differences which shall always keep us indifferent to one another.
Well, certainly there are many differences in our lives, but that doesn't mean that we can't get to know each other as ladies, simply become acquainted. Please do sit down and join me for tea.
Mrs. Davis, I fear that coming here today was a mistake, and good day.
Mrs. Lincoln, I understand that losing your husband was a dreadful experience. So was running with my children from the Yankees, seeing my husband in prison and treated horribly, often not even knowing if he were alive.
At least you had hope that he would return.
That did not make my feelings less, but throughout our marriage, I often nursed him through serious illnesses, and many times these were brought on by the strains of his position. He did not want to be president of the Confederacy. When news of his election was delivered to the House, he reported to me as if there had been a death in the family.
I feel no sympathy for you and yours. It was the Southern states that seceded. It was the Southern slave owners that wanted to spread the inhumane conditions of slavery. And it was the Southern conspiracy that's responsible for my husband's death. We have nothing in common.
Mrs. Lincoln, have you forgotten that you were born in Kentucky and raised by a Manning? Certainly you know someone who chose to support the Confederacy.
Many, and it pains me to think of them. Bound down as I am in my grief and sorrow, they are all traitors to myself, my husband, and the Union. It matters not whether they survived the war, for they are all dead to me. was looking at my sister Elizabeth when Mr. Lincoln and I first met. She and her husband, Jenny and Edwards, thought that Mr. Lincoln was not in a social position to marry me. They found him too poor, too common, and too uncivilized. And my sister Frances, she thought that Mr. Lincoln was the humblest man in town. Did your family approve Mr. Davis?
Well, my family had close ties with the Davises for many years before I ever met my future husband. But my mother did have some concerns. She felt that I was not truly in love with him, I was merely infatuated. She was also afraid that he was still mourning his first wife who had passed away 8 years earlier. And she did have some concern that he was twice my age. I was only 17 then.
I knew from the first moment when I saw Mr. Lincoln that we were spiritually bound together, that I was deeply in love. He spoke at a political gathering where I was in attendance. Oh, his voice commanded a quiet respect amongst the crowd. And everyone there, including myself, was spellbound.
When I first met Mr. Davis, I was on an extended visit to his brother's plantation, the Hurricane, Mississippi. I was impressed by his soldierly bearing and his grace on horseback, but he did seem rather aloof. He impressed me as being a man of remarkable character, but uncertain temper. And he had a way of assuming that everyone shared his opinions once he expressed them, which offended me. I did not expect him to like it very well.
Well, Mr. Lincoln and I were formally introduced to the party that my sister held. There was dancing for the young people in town. Oh, thank you so much. I shall never forget how Mr. Lincoln walked up to me that day. Oh, he held out his hand, and he bowed ever so low, and he said, "Miss Todd, I wish to dance with you in the worst way." And he did exactly that. Dance in the worst way.
Well, Mr. Davis was not nearly that bold. I took his aloofness as a challenge, and I approached it with enthusiasm. I would join him and his brother in the library in the evenings where they were accustomed to read and to develop theories about everything in heaven and on the earth. And of course, they did perfect these theories. They worked at it quite diligently. Oh, Mr. Davis had recently become involved in Mississippi politics, and I was quite surprised that I joined in those discussions as well.
My father always discussed politics with his sons and his daughters. I was fortunate. My father believed that women had useful minds as well as engagement and planned for a November wedding. The morning of the wedding, I told Sister Elizabeth that I would be having supper with her that evening, for I was marrying Mr. Lincoln. And she became livid.
What? You did not have a family wedding?
Oh, we had planned otherwise, but, well, it was Mr. Edwards who insisted that only a family wedding would be appropriate. He sent messengers to family members with invitations, and my best dress was washed and made ready. Sisters Elizabeth and Frances baked my wedding cake. Oh, she would be so embarrassed for me to tell this, but, well, it was still warm. We sliced it, so goodness. After our brief ceremony, Mr. Lincoln and I began our married life together in a $4 a week room at the Globe Tavern. And 9 months later, our first son, Robert, arrived.
Really? That's silly. Well, Mr. Davis and I returned to his plantation, Riotwood, and several years before the arrival of our first child. We have had 6 altogether, and already have lost 2. The closest to my heart was our son, Joe, and I will never forget the day that he fell from the veranda outside the Simmons quarters at our home in Richmond, down to the red brick pavement below. The doctor said that he would never regain consciousness, and shortly afterwards he received his inheritance from our Heavenly Father. I cannot tell you how distraught Mr. Davis became. I had to forget my own grief to comfort him. What happened to your little boy?
Willie was too good for this earth. God reclaimed his own. Oh, Willie died of bilious fever. He was my angel boy. Oh, and Mr. Lincoln was so distraught with grief. I thought he would drive himself mad. The pressures of the war were upon him, and it seemed there wasn't enough time to properly grieve for our little boy. Oh, 1862 was an impossible year. Were there sinister motives behind your Joe's death?
I did not see any treachery, though we were always suspicious of spies and saboteurs during those days. That was an impossible time, and one from which we never did fully recover. Well, there was an outpouring of public sympathy after Joe's death. The sympathy of thousands is acceptable as a tribute to both the living and the dead, but we sorely miss the opportunity to mourn in secret.
There was little sympathy for us during our period of mourning. Even members of my family who had joined the Confederacy were unsympathetic to our loss. At the same time, we received word that my brother Samuel had been killed at Battle of Shiloh. And shortly later, we received word that dear little sister Emily's husband, General Benjamin Hardin Helm, had been killed while leading Kentucky's Orphan Brigade. I could not mourn for them, for they wore coats of gray instead of blue. And this made our grief even greater. And I found Washington society unsympathetic.
Unsympathetic? Really? Many of my closest friends are members of Washington Society, and I cannot imagine them being unsympathetic when such a loss occurs. Why, President Pierce himself waded through snowdrifts up to his waist for nearly an hour to inquire of my health after the arrival of my 3rd child, Jefferson.
Now, Charlie, I suppose I did not meet the lady's expectations in Washington. Oh, many had heard of Mr. Lincoln's unfortunate boyhood experiences and assumed that I shared the same. After meeting me, I was found to be either too Southern or too Northern, sometimes even too Western of the ladies of Washington. I was constantly criticized and compared to my predecessors. And of course, from what I understand, you were somewhat one of my predecessors, a true White House in Washington hostess with Paul. Or so I've been told.
Well, of course I took my hostessing responsibilities seriously. It did not take me long to discover the importance of social occasions in determining the actions of public men. Why, when my husband was Secretary of War, we were expected to entertain every member of Congress at least once each winter, with additional dinners for officers of the Army, chairman committees when there were time to discuss important issues. But you cannot mean to say that Washington society never accepted you because of me. I certainly had my critics, as anyone who would read the newspapers would know.
Oh, sometimes the vampire press is my worst enemy.
And mine as well. I was warmly greeted by a crowd of people when I first came to Richmond at the beginning of the war. People were running beside the carriage throwing bouquets of flowers inside for me. But there were many others who were wary of me. Perhaps because I came from the deepest South, or perhaps because I'd already spent so much time in Washington. But the press watched me very closely.
Well, first I was accused of having too much influence over Mr. Lincoln, of actually running the White House. Then I was accused of being a Confederate spy, simply because I had a Kentucky accent and named Confederate officers amongst my family.
My receptions were criticized as being Washington imitations.
Well, mine were criticized for being French imitation.
I was expected to have a public reception once every 2 weeks, with a household full of children to be raised, with a husband who was often ill and needed extensive care, a constant stream of officers and advisors coming through the house. They dared to criticize me for not returning messages and for limiting the hours of my receptions. Can you believe that?
Oh, yes, I can. But the press criticized my receptions for being a waste of money, where I wore elaborate gowns that were far too expensive for wartime.
And if I didn't spend enough money on entertaining, then they criticized me for shirking my social duties and for hoarding the president's salary.
Well, the press criticizes every small detail. One reporter slandered my manners. Another criticized my choice of wearing a white ball gown at the inauguration. And yet another stated that I looked as if I had a flower pot on my head and a rose bush attached to my bosom.
My enemy said that my wit was biting and sarcastic, that I had not read all the books I quoted from. I was domineering, uncouth. I influenced Mr. Davis too highly, and I expected people to bow down and worship him. They even called me Queen Marina.
Oh, I was referred to as the Republican Queen. Oh, the press, they were so critical. And I was accused of influencing Mr. Lincoln and encouraging him to practice nepotism. Why, they did not understand that he had very little family, and none of them were given government positions.
What about your family? Were any of them given government positions?
There's no need to mention them. That's not true nepotism.
Mrs. Lincoln, I believe that I had just as much difficulty with the press and public opinion in general as you did. Do you think that this might be a bond of sympathy between us?
Perhaps. But the war has changed everything. And I don't see how you and I could be friends. Mrs. Davis, I have family members. People I share blood with. And friends. People I've known since my childhood who are now my bitter enemies because of the war. And if I have not been able to mend relationships with them, how can I develop a friendship with you?
I never let my friendships be affected by the war, regardless of the state of origin of my friends. And I believe you misunderstand Southern loyalties. Mr. Davis was not a traitor. He did not want secession, at least not at first. In the Senate, he tried to steer fellow Southerners away from that course. When the shooting started in Kansas, he said that people should try to settle the differences in a more peaceful way. The day that he finally addressed his farewell to the Senate, he spoke with the manner of one who was saying farewell to his family. But we all felt blood in the air. When he returned home, he prayed that God would permit before it was too late that the matters be settled more peacefully.
That he never should have supported the Southern states' secession at all.
He supported secession because he felt that there was no choice. Slaves were our lawful property, guaranteed by
parents were slave owners. Our slaves were house servants who helped raise the children. But from my home in Lexington, I watched countless slaves on their way to auction. I saw people chained together, ill-treated, whipped. I saw families torn apart and sold without consideration to their feelings whatsoever. Slavery, the institution of slavery, is a horrible example of the exploitation of a human being. And it is the sin of the South that killed my beloved Mr. Lincoln.
Mrs. Lincoln, your husband was killed by John Wilkes Booth, not my husband, not slaves, and not the entire South.
I do miss him so.
Your husband's death
It is
was...
my assured belief that death is a blessed transition